So I'm just going to go into Xcode here and make a new project. If you want to follow along, you can do the same with me. All right, so we're just going to go get started with a, whoops, we don't want to do a playground here. Unfortunately, playgrounds are Swift only, so we'll have to make a whole new project here. We'll do a single view application for iOS, and we'll just call this objects. You can name it whatever you want. We're not going to do a whole lot with it. I just want to show you what objects are. Okay, so when you make an empty project, Apple gives you a few objects already. They have the app delegate objects, the .h and the .m. The view controller object, which is .h, .m right there. Well, we're going to go ahead and we're going to make a new object, like car, like the one I just showed you. So to make a new object, all you have to do is go File, and then we're going to make some new files here. And you define a object. We're going to do a Cocoa Touch class, or you could do these manually. I'll show you what happens here if we do Cocoa Touch class. So we're just going to name this car. Now there is one thing you should know about objects. They all share the same namespace. So if you make an object called UI button, Apple already has an object called UI button, and they will clash and it'll give you problems. So the way you get around this in Objective-C is you add a 2 to 3 letter prefix to all of your object names, and that will prevent namespace clashes. So for this, I'm going to do JJW. Those are my initials. So all my objects are JJW car, JJW view controller, whatever I want. You can do whatever you want. It's just a way to make sure you don't have any namespace collisions. Okay, now the subclass here, in Objective-C, just about everything is a subclass of NSObject. Once again, I'm going to go over inheritance in the next video, but what that means fundamentally is our JJW car is an NSObject. It just adds more functionality. Rather, we're a subclass of NSObject. But don't worry about that too much. Just right now, NSObject is the most broad thing we can get, or the most fundamental base class we can use in Objective-C. So we have our car. That's a subclass of NSObject. It is an Objective-C. Let's go ahead and make this a class and see what happens here. Okay, whoops, let's pop down there. So you can see we have a car.h and a car.m. Now when I started iOS development, I was a little bit confused about these two files and what exactly they meant. And it's actually something really simple. So your H stands for header and your M stands for implementation. Think of it this way. H is everything that is public and M is everything that's private. So you define all this great code that adds this features, functionality, can do all these great things. All of that is in your .m file where it actually does the stuff. But the way it's designed is you don't need to look in the .m, or you don't really need to know how it works. In the .h, you declare things that you can do. So let's say you have a method like drive if you're a car. Well, in your .h, you declare that method that says drive. And anyone who uses your class knows that your car knows how to drive. But in the .m, you can actually see how a drive works and what happens. Like you accelerate and then you go to 60 and you drive that for 2 minutes and then you slow down and you stop. Well, oftentimes you don't need to know all those details. So to make things simpler, you only declare what you need in the .h that's public, and what's in the .m is private. Now when you're defining your own objects, you have access to both the .h and the .m files, but the intention is that you really only use the h as a contract of what your object can do. Now when you use Apple's files, like UI button I said, let's go take a look at UI button object, you're only going to get the .h file. They don't let you see the .m file. So you know that this object, this UI button, you can see, has all these properties like title edge inset, content edge inset, set title for state. These are all things that it can do in the .h that's declared, but we have no idea what's actually happening in the .m. And the idea is it keeps it simplified. So that's the general idea you want to go with. So declare what your object can do in the .h, what things you want public, then actually do it in the .m to keep the stuff private that not everyone needs to know about, to make this really complex job of programming as simple as possible. Okay, so let's take a look at the .h here to start with. So the first thing you'll see is an import statement. So this import lets you pull in the stuff that you need from other classes, objects, frameworks, whatever. Now usually you'll see import foundation. That's the basic Objective-C library that lets you do the stuff you need. You may often see import UI kit like this. UI kit.h. And if it was a subclass of something that, like a window or a button or something that's part of UI kit, you would need this. But basically, this is the stuff your object has access to. And since we're an NS object, that's the highest level object, we only need foundation. So there's only two things to a header. There's the interface, which is where it begins. So you have at interface and at end. After at interface is your object name, colon, and then the object you are a subclass of. So once again, we'll go over that more in inheritance, but we are a JJW car, which is an NS object. If we take a look at the NS object, you'll see that these are all the properties and methods that this object has. So for instance, our JJW car will respond to all this stuff. So we could say JJW car perform selector, or stuff like description. All that stuff we have because we actually are an NS object, but we're going to add more to that. So we want our car to be able to drive. So let's declare a method that this object can do. So we're going to do this on an instance of the car. So we're going to start with a minus. We don't want to return anything, so we'll just say void, and we'll just say drive. And there we go. We declared that our car can drive. Now I said instance was a minus, so I want to go into that a little bit more detail. So there's two types of methods that objects in Objective-C can do. There's instance methods and there's class methods. A class method would start with a plus. So we could, for instance, say drive. Now what the difference is this is called on an instance of an object. So drive would be called on my car or on your car, not on the ID of a car. Well, you could make a class method, and this works on the actual class itself. Now, drive doesn't make a lot of sense, but you could do something like new car, and this, like, let's just say that this returns a new car, so instance type. We can say new, let's say car with red paint. There we go. There we go. Okay, so what this does is this will actually act on the car object, not the instance, and this will say, hey, car, give me a new car with red paint. So see how that works on the class of a car, whereas drive works on an instance of a car. So hopefully that made a little bit more sense. 99% of the time you're going to be using instance methods. Usually class methods are just for convenience, where you want a new object that has some stuff already set up for you. Okay, and then one last thing is we gave our car speed. So let's give this a property. Usually properties come before methods. We'll say at property, and we'll give an int called speed. So we know that a car can have a variable set as speed. So a car could have a speed of 100 miles an hour, 150 miles an hour, or whatever. This is something we can customize on each instance. So my car, we could set the speed to 80. Your car, we could set the speed to 100. And then both cars we can call drive on. Okay, so we've declared everything we need to in the header file. Let's actually make a implementation for this. So let's jump to the .m file. And we're going to actually define that. So it was void drive. And then, so it starts with the exact same thing in your header, is whether it's a class or instance method, the return type. In this case, it doesn't return anything. And the name of the method was drive. Unfortunately, we don't have the setup to actually make an animated car that drives or anything, so we're just going to go nslog. This will just print something down to the console, and we'll put vroom. There we go. So every time we call drive on a car, this is what's actually happening under the hood, is this is being printed to the log. Now, the way this is intended is you don't actually know what's actually happening. You're just calling drive on a car. Okay, let's go ahead and make one of these objects and test it out. So in our view controller and view did load, this is a great place to do stuff because as soon as we run the app, this will get called when the view loads. First thing we're going to do is we're going to import the car we just made, the class. We'll import jjwcar.h. So we're importing this class file here. And the first thing we want to do is make an instance of the car. So we can go jjwcar, that's the type. We're going to give a pointer to that object, and we're going to call this mycar equals, and we're going to call jjwcar. So this is going to be a method called new. Now because we're an NS object, we can respond to new. Even though we didn't declare new, there's nowhere it says new. If we go to NS object, there's a method called new. Now you'll notice that I'm calling this method on the actual class. So this is a class method right here with a plus. So we're saying, hey, car, give us a new car. And we're going to assign that to my car. Now we can go mycar.speed equals, let's just say 120. There you go. We set that property on my car. And then we can go mycar drive. And we can call that method on my car. So let's just run it real quick. We should get a little log statement that says room. Alright, simulator's firing up here. Give that just a second. Oops. There you go, and printed right here. So just to recap, we made a new car by calling the class method anew on our car, which we assigned to my car. This is an instance of JJW car. The class is JJW car. The object is my car of type JJW car. We assigned this property to 120, and we called an instance method on that car. Now if we look at drive, so we declared the method here, and then if you go to the .m, you can see that we actually said log this word right here. And that's really all objects are. They get a lot more complex with all sorts of fancy stuff you can do, but really it just groups code together. So we could reuse this car anywhere. We could add all sorts of great functionality, and anytime we need a car, we can just go JJW car, new, and we can use all that functionality. So it's all grouped together. So let's take a look around in Xcode and see what's happening. So if you look at view controller, this is another object. You have a .h and a .m. So you can see that when view loads, these are the things that are getting called, and that happens. You can see that view controller is a subclass of UI view controller. So these are all things that we can call, and you see there's all sorts of great stuff. So is being presented. You can ask your view controller, is it being presented? Is being dismissed? You can say wants full screen layout. So because we're a subclass of view controller, we can do all those things on ourselves. So we can do things like, let's say, self wants full screen layout. So we haven't declared this full screen layout anywhere, but because we are a UI view controller, those are things we can do. And once again, we don't know exactly how that works because we can't see the .m file. We just know that this is something declared in the header that we can do. So that's the basics of making objects. One last thing I want to show you is one other way we can make objects without code is if we go to the storyboard and we drag an object, like let's say a button. When this is loaded, what storyboard does is it makes a button. So it might go like UI button new, and that's how that button's made, but without any code, it does that for you. And then you see on the button you have all these things like text color, or so we made the text color pink or the text color red. These are just properties. So the same exact thing could be accomplished by going, let's get rid of that here, UI button, whoops, and we'll say my button equals UI button new, and then you can go, whoops, that's not a bar button, UI button, and then you can go things like my button dot background color equals UI color red color. And that does the exact same thing in code. It's just the storyboard makes it a little bit easier because you can drag stuff around and see how it's actually going to look. But what that's actually doing is just creating objects just like you did here. So hopefully that kind of gives you a good idea what objects are. They're defined with a class, which is a .h and a .m that defines everything the object can do. And then you call methods and you set properties on objects and you just reuse them so you have your code only defined in one place. That's really all there is to object-oriented programming, which is the most popular programming paradigm, just because it's a really efficient way to not have to write code multiple times. So I hope that helped. Hopefully you guys learned a little bit. If you guys have any questions or none of that made sense, let me know in the comments. I'll be happy to answer your questions. This is a topic I struggled with for a really long time, which I really shouldn't have. It's a fairly simple idea. It's just a little bit weird to think about at first. But hopefully you guys will catch on a little quicker than I did and get rolling with that. Until next time.